led a wealthy chieftain by the name Abram from his home in Ur of Chaldea to the land of Canaan. Now, let me get this. He also made a covenant with this patriarch, whose name he changed from Abraham, changed to Abraham. It includes a number of promises for reaching application. One of them involved the ownership of the land of, I said last time, I was talking about Palestine. You won't find that word in the Bible, Palestine. It's Canaan. The land of Canaan. It's not the land of Palestine. That was a word that was used about years later. It was always Judea or Palestine or Canaan. Now, one of them involves the ownership of the land of the Canaan. He gave it to Abraham as an assurance that he would be his forever, as his seed forever. Now, about 3,500 years ago, God made a covenant with Israel just before they entered the promised land. He assured them that even if they failed to obey Him, even if they were driven out of the land and scattered abroad, He would preserve them and bring them into conversion and eventually restore them in Canaan. Now, the close of 3,000 years ago, God made a covenant with David. Now, He gave him the following pledge there in 2 Samuel 7, 4 through 17. He said, a son of David would be Israel's next king. That son would construct the temple. That son, even though he might be chastened, disobedient, would never be dethroned. The right of the kingship over Israel would never be broken from his descendants. Now, history shows that the David's lineage was carefully preserved. That's the reason we find in the book of the birth of Jesus, he was of the tribe of David, Jesus. All the others were Joseph, and the others was all of the tribe of Judah. They were Israelites, but they were also that of Judea. David was available to serve King of Israel in every area. Now, the three covenants we described are the Abrahamic covenant, the Canaan covenant, and the Davidic covenant. All three unconditional. That is fulfillment upon the faithfulness of God. They cannot be validated by unfaithfulness of man. Some of the promises of these have always been literally fulfilled, and the one still to be realized will be fulfilled the same way. The Lord continues to view the Israelites as a special people. In spite of their sins, He will see to their appointed role as the kingdom program is filled. Now, having studied Abraham and the Palestinian in the previous lesson, we become more detailed study of the Davidic covenant next time to continue with the major covenants of God. The Mosaic covenant is given to Israel by God through Moses at Mount Sinai after they left Egypt. Now in Exodus 19:46, you have been what said, ye have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle wing, brought you into myself. Now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and it shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Now upon hearing these words, the people with one voice responded to this. This is Exodus 19. All the Lord has said we will do. Then in chapter 12 that follows, and also in 20 to 31, the response of Israel in keeping the Mosaic law covenant are spelled out, including terms listed in the Ten Commandments. The Mosaic covenant stands in sharp contrast to Abraham and the Canaan covenant in at least two ways. First, the Mosaic covenant was conditional. It was put on condition. It did not contain every unconditional promise. In other words, God's part of the bargain was to keep if Israel kept her apart. And second, the Mosaic covenant is very complex. In fact, it contains 613 commandments. Those who have made special study tells you that 365 are prohibited and 240 are demands. Many of these rules are extremely conditional and difficult to comprehend. In view of the previous covenant, the question naturally arises, what will the purpose of the Mosaic covenant? We shall soon see that it had a very important function in the program, because turning to that, however, I would emphasize that the Mosaic covenant did not succeed the covenants of God made with Abraham. They did not nullify them, put it that way. The Abrahamic covenant continues to be forged in Mosaic covenant, and conditions of the covenant did not annul the Abrahamic covenant and was unconditional. Here is what Paul said in Galatians. He said this in Galatians 3:17. And this I say, that the covenant that will confirm before my God in Christ, that referred to the Abrahamic covenant. The law, that refers to the Mosaic covenant, which was 430 years after, cannot be annulled, that it should be promised no effect. For if the inheritance be by law, it is no more a promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. Now Israel claim to the Canaan is based upon God's unconditional promise. Promise to Abraham, and not only unconditional covenant with Israel at Mount Sinai. With this in mind, we are ready to answer the question, what was the purpose of the Mosaic law? The Mosaic law was, first of all, a kingdom agreement. God, king of Israel, made a proposal to Israel. Speaking to Moses, he said to the children of Israel, now, in Exodus 19:5 and 6, now therefore, if you will obey my voice indeed, keep my covenant, then you will be a peculiar treasure unto me above all of the earth is mine. And ye shall be a kingdom, a priest, and a holy nation. Now God assured Israel that if they obeyed him, he would do three things. He would make them a peculiar treasure that would be a cherished possession of God. He would also make them a kingdom of priests. They would meditate God's blessing to the Gentile nation in much the same way as the priest ministered to them and God. In addition, God assured that if they obeyed his voice and kept his covenant, they would be unto him a holy nation. Sorry to say, the Israelites has never enjoyed these blessings. This is because they failed to keep the part of the bargain. They broke the law that God had given them, the Ten Commandments. They worshiped heathens, deities. They profaned his name, and they, instead of receiving the blessing, they received the curse of the Mosaic covenant instead of the blessing. Were it not for Abrahamic and the Canaan covenant, all hope would be gone. They would have lost everything. But those two covenants, now, the 116 moral, civil, and ceremonial laws that govern the lives of Israel, even though it is undefiled system, those 100 laws, which serve as Israel's constitution, can be divided into three sections: the moral law, the civil law, and the ceremonial law. Now, the moral law is, we would call the Ten Commandments. To bring it right down to the point, it said, love thy neighbor as thyself with all thy heart, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and with all thy might. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, the civil law is the way they were to treat people. Even slaves showed how they was to treat their slaves. Now, the other one is ceremonial laws, govern the worship of the Israelites. They include the instruction regarding the sacrifice, the offering, the cleansing process, and all the things associated with the tabernacle and the temple. Now, guys, the Mosaic law was God's means of bringing his chosen people to himself through individual salvation. The Apostle Paul, as in Hebrew, made a declaration, wherefore the law was a schoolmaster, brings us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. That's Galatians 3:24. So the law was put in charge to lead us to Christ, that we might be justified by faith. Now, the Mosaic covenant is a schoolmaster, was intended to lead those. Let me put it this way. The Mosaic law was led to lead us to Christ, the Ten Commandments. In other words, if you keep the commandments, are you going to be saved? Because you can't keep them. Sort of like a lady fixing. I fixed a big chicken the other day. I put it in a crock pot, and I left it in there all night to keep it. I stuck a fork in it, tried to lift it out of that crock pot. It wouldn't come out. It just fell apart. So I took a big old spatula and I stuck it underneath it, and it worked. I picked it up and got it out. Now that's the law. Where the law, there's nothing wrong with that fork. That fork was as strong as it ever was. Ten Commandments is just as strong as it ever was. But what it is, there's nothing weak about the fork at all. The problem was in the meat. The fork was weak to the flesh. I stuck that fork in there and lifted it up, and it just went right on through. what was weak? That tells me that I am weak. I am the meat. And the fourth, the law, was nothing wrong with the law. The law just went right on. I used the fourth, went right on through it. God sent his son in the likeness of man, sinful flesh, and for sin, sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us. Now, salvation is not obtained by keeping the Ten Commandments. We can't do that by keeping the Ten Commandments. Salvation is not obtained by keeping the Ten Commandments. They are in the flesh, those that are in the flesh cannot please God. It is received by trust in Christ, who alone fulfills the perfect law and paid the penalty for sin, demands, and when he died on the cross. Remember then, it was because of the weakness of the sinful flesh that we must turn to the grace of God for salvation. Forgiveness, peace, life, everlasting are provided by God's grace, not by us. By God's grace. Everything is done by God's grace. I quit there.